She married a paralyzed billionaire CEO out of pity and found herself in the most unbelievable love story. Listen closely for the next half-minute because this is where everything tilts. Say it to their faces, he whispers, standing without the exoskeleton in a glass-walled greenhouse that smells like lemon and wet soil. I didn't marry you for love, she says, steady but shaking. Then why did you stay? Because presence became the visible part of love. A lemon blossom detaches and twirls between them like a tiny white comet. The wheelchair behind him clicks as the brake locks, a small hard sound that feels like a vow. If I hold this stand for 3 more seconds, he breathes, you'll finally tell them the part nobody believes. I will, she says. But you begin. My body quit without a 2 weeks' notice, he answers. And the world decided pity was the only language I deserved. I spoke it, she admits. I signed a marriage to save something bigger than us. The foundation funding your mother's therapy, he says. And the company everyone wanted to bury me under, he adds, smiling the kind of smile that knows pain. Did you hate me for it, she asks. I hated the sound of pity's shoes, he says. Then you did something worse and better. What? You stayed. If stories about courage, repair, and second chances speak to you, tap like right now so more people find this one, then keep watching. Tell them, he says. She nods. I married him for optics, she says. I stayed because he taught me the difference between being useful and being present. And presence, he says, refusing to fall, is the only currency that spends in a storm. Ready, she whispers. Ready, he answers. Then we start at the window, she says. Where a room full of money pretended the ocean did not exist. Fade the greenhouse. Roll back to the beginning. The first time Layla saw Arrow Valley, a floor of pale stone held a rectangular window that cut the Atlantic into a postcard the size of a wall. The sea kept insisting it was alive. The people in the room insisted they were above it. They talked in terms that sounded like keys to private doors. Tranches. Quorum. Proxy. Vote counts. The sound landed like coins on glass. Arrow sat in a sleek carbon fiber chair that hummed faintly, hands resting on a folded throw. The chair looked engineered to obey. His body would not. But his eyes moved like weather. Slate green. Sharp. Younger than the news had made him. Layla held a pair of white cotton gloves in her lap so she would not keep moisturizing her hands. Her thumbs kept finding the seam anyway. She had spent nights zooming and pinching at satellite photos of this house on the edge of an island chain until the roofline felt like a bruise on her phone. She walked through doors that could have doubled as arches in a museum and into a world she did not know how to belong to. She was a sign language interpreter who translated hearings and hospital consults for a living. She was here to interpret a different kind of language. Survival. Ms. Morel, said Celine Vallon. Her black dress was not mourning. It was armor. She stood the way some people sit, fully arrived and not asking permission. You understand the arrangement. Layla nodded once. She did not trust her throat. The foundation that bore the Vallon name had paid for her mother's post-stroke therapy when insurance lost interest. Without the next tranche, her mother's progress would shudder and stall. Words would become a shoreline visible across a channel again. Almost there and never quite. Celine slid a folder across the table. The paper whispered like fine sand. A civil ceremony. Minimal publicity. No tabloids. You are compensated through the foundation and become its public custodian, so the grants continue uninterrupted. In return, you legally marry my nephew Anne. And you keep a board from dismantling the thing he built, Layla said, before the sentence could finish cutting her. Because when donors see a ring, they imagine continuity. Celine's mouth made almost a smile. It looked like a decision, not delight. Optics are often the shortest route between need and help. Layla let the sentence fall between them. She looked past Celine to the man at the window. The internet had made him a parable and then an effigy. Brilliant boy genius turned ocean emperor. Fleet after fleet of autonomous cargo vessels. A launch accelerated for reasons tied to shareholders and a press cycle. A battery array controversy that would not die. Then something with a name that sounded like a string instrument gone wrong. A rare autoimmune cascade. Muscles drafted into a war they never agreed to fight. Overnight, the body he trusted staged a strike. The chair replaced the stride. None of the articles mentioned how alert his gaze was. How he seemed to track not just the white scribble of waves but the tiniest shift in people's faces when they thought they were composed. It felt like being measured and seen and also given back to yourself intact. She put her fingertip on the folder because if she didn't touch something, she would float. I can't promise love, she said. I can promise presence. His eyes shifted to her. For a heartbeat he looked relieved and offended at the exact same time, like someone who learned the truth and found the floor at once. Presence, he said. His voice was quieter than the window's wind. That's rare currency here. He did not take the pen. Someone else leaned forward too fast with a pen ready. Layla took it. She signed her name with the loops her mother had taught her on a kitchen table that smelled like pepper soup and sea air. The signature felt like stealing a future and handing it back at the same time. Afterward, the judge came and left without leaving a dent. The ceremony happened in the greenhouse as evening bruised the glass. A lemon tree shed 3 blossoms as if honoring the arrangement with a small gift. The ring slid on. Arrow's thumb tremored against her knuckle, a lightning flicker trapped beneath skin. It made her feel that electricity still lived where paralysis had tried to move in and lock the doors. You've done something good, Celine said when it was done. Her kiss landed near Layla's cheek like a stamp. A blessing with bookkeeping in the ink. They gave Layla a suite on the west side of the house where the light came in like clean water. The bed was a white raft anchored to a floor that had never met scuff marks. The bath was a freestanding tub that looked like it held miniature opinions about soap. Everything was beautiful and a little absurd. She tried lying on the mattress and felt like an imposter on a cloud. She took a blanket and slept on the rug in a study she found by following a draft down the hall. The window there looked out over black water spattered with stars. A freighter cut a line of moving light. She told herself she slept there to be closer to the sea. She did not say the bed looked like a promise she had not earned. Dawn moved like a gradual permission slip. The house was quiet in that expensive way that means someone else has already waged war against dust and won. Layla woke to the soft motor hum of an electric chair and the kind of curse a person makes when a simple turn becomes a negotiation. She sat up on her elbows and pushed hair from her face. Arrow was in the doorway. He had tried to pivot without the aide who shadowed him and caught the frame wrong. The chair sat at an unhelpful angle. His jaw had a morning dark to it, and his hair didn't care about money. His expression said he had run a race no one else could see and did not enjoy losing. Do you want help? Layla asked. I want to throw this chair into the ocean, he said. He allowed a sideways laugh at his own drama. Help would be wiser. She stood and padded over, barefoot on stone that held some of night's cool. She put both hands on the chair's frame and felt the faint vibration of the motors waiting for instructions. Together, they nudged the wheels and corrected the angle. It was the kind of task that, in another life, would not deserve a sentence. Here, it felt like the costume change between humiliation and dignity. Thank you, he said, breath scissoring a little. Do you want coffee? Layla asked. He blinked as if she had offered him an unthinkable luxury. Yes, he said carefully. Please. The kitchen looked like a science museum built by a chef who never waited for a delivery. She boiled water the old way because she did not trust machines that smiled at her with glossy screens. She made 2 mugs and brought them to the study with the window that pretended to be a painting. He was there already. The ocean wrote its rhythm for those who could read. She set his mug on the table within reach, carefully, like placing warmth within a reachable orbit. He watched her hand. Something passed through his expression. Not gratitude exactly. Risk. Everyone has been very careful, he said. How about we be clumsy, she replied. He laughed like daylight had surprised him indoors. That set a rhythm they did not plan and would later admit they needed. Mornings included a book. Nothing from the leather spines in the formal study that smelled like people telling guests they read. Paperbacks borrowed from the tiny village library stamped with dates and fingerprints. He liked spare novels with stubborn morals and travel writing that stopped in towns maps ignored. Lunch appeared the way it does in houses where every request is answered in the adjacent room by someone already moving. She declined the third course until the staff learned she meant it. Afternoons were a cliff path walk for her and a long watch at the window for him. Evenings contained index cards in bright colors with tasks from the speech therapist. Draw this fruit. Describe that smell. Use 3 words for memory. Layla sent them to her mother and waited for the handwriting to thicken its lines. At 4, his aide Kay would appear. Kay was tall and carried competence like a quiet backpack. She looked like she had once rowed a boat very fast for a very long time and had made peace with discomfort. She would bring Arrow to the window if he wasn't there already. Just once, Kay met Layla's eyes over the back of the chair and nodded in a way that meant the word help without asking for anything. 3 weeks into the marriage, the sky hauled in a western storm like a net full of drumbeats. The glass walls of the greenhouse sang a little. Thunder dragged its knuckles across the horizon. Inside, the house remembered it had been wood before money taught it how to be stone. A flash cut the room in white for a second. Layla saw herself reflected in the window layered onto the dark sea. She looked small and stubborn. The ring on her hand looked like a borrowed crown. Her throat went tight, and her mother's face rose overlapping the storm, eyes bright with the hunger of someone trying to make a mouth remember. A storm is a good place to confess, Arrow said, not looking at her, as if reading from a script the weather hands you. Novels have always insisted on it. What would you confess? She asked. That I despise pity, he said. He did not watch the sky when he said it. He watched his own hands like artifacts. And that I accepted it when it wore your face. He hadn't thrown it like a blade. He set it down like a heavy box they had to carry together. Layla rolled the ring along her finger and let the small cool metal reset her breath. I married you because the foundation kept my mother's therapy alive, she said. It felt like wrenching open a locked door and apologizing to the hinges on the way through. I can't make it noble. Lightning stitched the distance. Thunder followed like a late response. He set his jaw in a way that looked like a man refusing anesthesia. Do you want to know what happened to me? He asked. The articles used a name that sounds like a violin, she said. That your immune system became a xenophobic country and started deporting you. A shadow crossed his face that did not belong to the storm. They also said I pushed a launch too fast. That I ignored flags on a new battery array. That a fire aboard one of our ships killed a technician. People said I buried the fault to keep the stock price breathing. He nodded toward the line where sea met sky. The night after the leak, I tried to lift a glass of water. My hand forgot. 48 hours later, my legs stopped obeying. A week after that, I was a rumor inside my own body. And the fire? Layla asked. Her voice thinned as she tried to stretch it over both compassion and the need for a fact. Sabotage, he said. The word was dry as paper. I knew it the second I saw the heat profile on the logs. It took months to prove what my gut saw in 2 hours. Meanwhile, the internet built a pyre. My body lay down on it. Rain hit the glass in a new pattern. Layla lifted her palm and laid it to the cool pane as if answering a question the house had not asked. My father died on a contracted freighter, she said, to the window, to the water, to the storm that had gathered the guts to say what calm days let sleep. Not yours. A different company. They sailed into a gale they should have dodged. The settlement moved our building and insulted my mother's grief. I told myself I would hate you cleanly when I met you. He turned just enough that she could see how the sentence landed. He didn't flinch. He looked like someone who wanted so badly to deserve the life he had built, then lost the guidebook. I don't know what to do with that, he said. Me neither, she answered. She kept her palm to the glass. But the only people who ever changed anything in my life were the ones who stayed in the room after the truth landed. So I'm staying. He held her gaze like it was a language he never studied but immediately recognized. Presence, he said softly, as if testing the word's weight. They began the work a body demands when it wants to come back. The exoskeleton waited in the gym like a patient creature with stainless steel intentions. Arrow had refused the pool at first because water had been the place he felt invincible. A harness lowering him like cargo into blue felt like a loss measured in gallons. He made peace with it gradually because the therapists counted improvements in numbers that did not lie and because he enjoyed proving machines wrong. Kay managed the belts with a competence that made everything feel safer. With Layla, he practiced standing. The first time she buckled the frame at his hips, he said, "It feels like wearing a spider." She tightened the straps and laughed once so she did not cry twice. "Pretend," she said. "What am I pretending?" he asked. "You are a boy in a yard, and your mother is at the door. She doesn't yell. She waits for you to look up and notice you were being called the whole time." He looked at her. He looked at the bars. He closed his eyes. "Presence," he murmured, as if reminding his muscles what word they worked for. He shifted weight off metal and onto bone and found the seam where gravity begins to negotiate. He rose the way dawn does, not all at once, but undeniably. He did not stand tall. He stood true. It lasted a single held breath. Maybe two. He sank back into the chair with a gasp. The look he gave her wasn't pride. It was not even relief. It was comprehension. "You're crying," he said. "Shut up and be miraculous," she replied, swiping at her face with the heel of her hand. She was laughing. It sounded like someone discovering their own voice fits their mouth. "Terrible inversion of a miracle," he muttered, then braced and tried again. The second time took less conversation. The third time he steadied and gripped the bar and lifted his eyes like stepping onto a roof without a ladder. Presence became a practice. It looked like showing up at the window even when the wind came at the glass like a dare. It looked like Layla making coffee with her own hands in a kitchen that assumed she never would. It looked like Kay pretending to fold towels in the back of the gym when what she was really folding was fear. The house had rules. Layla learned them by breaking them gently. Celine liked speaking in plural because it made decisions feel inevitable. Lawyers preferred not to encounter spontaneous kindness because it felt like a litigation risk. Press liaisons hovered like humidity. Kay taught Layla how to crack the narrow vent in the greenhouse at noon so orchids would not melt into gossip. When the first article leaked a photo of Layla's face and the ring in a frame stuffed with tasteful plants, Celine invited her to a conversation. The greenhouse was full of lemon glow and the smell of wet dirt. It looked too alive for what happened there. "You're a helpful narrative," Celine began, slicing a lemon on the wooden bench without a cutting board. The juice ran like an underline. "You work hard. You don't blink at vows. You stand beside a man the internet tried to break. It performs well for donors who think compassion is a stock they can own." Layla watched the knife move. She said nothing. Silence made people with power nervous because it wasn't billable. "It would be helpful if you stayed helpful," Celine continued. "If you remember why you are here." Layla lifted her eyes. "Do you?" she asked. A flicker. Something like respect and warning in the same blink. "I am here because my nephew built something beautiful with money that could have built anything. I keep interventions from men who want to break what they didn't build. I do this by telling a better story than the one they sell. And the truth, Layla said. The truth is whatever saves the most lives, Celine answered. She did not say it kindly or cruelly. She said it like she had paid for it. When Layla told Arrow, he rolled to the window and tracked a freighter the size of a city block carving the horizon. Sometimes my aunt mistakes cynicism for strategy, he said. I mistake idealism for power. Between the two of us, clarity occasionally shows up and pretends to be hope. Do you trust her? Layla asked. With the company and the foundation, he said. Yes. With me. She still thinks affection is the slowest form of blackmail. They both smiled at the same time and then did not. The first tremor of danger came disguised as courtesy. A doctor called politely to request access to the earliest blood work for a quality review. A week later, a lab tech wrote about a misfiled vial he could not locate. Neither event liked the other. Together, they smelled like intention. Layla did not mention any of it until she could show something with edges. She took the long way to the Foundation's archive, a room under a latched skylight where sunlight arrived as clean geometry. Grant ledgers were stacked in rows. She unfolded a year of approvals from before the accident. Her finger traced numbers into stories. Coastal clinics that trained deckhands to read pressure and light. Fishermen's unions with weather radios punched into budgets. A small grant to a Northern Ireland co-op that subsidized safer routes during storm season. She thought of her father's last day. She closed her eyes and breathed until she could trust herself not to weaponize gratitude. Then she found a proposal that was not a grant. It was a contract. It argued for retrofitting an entire fleet with an open-source safety protocol designed by a coastal engineer named Imani Ndaur. The board notes rejected it for cost and exposure. The margin note in Celine's handwriting said, unwise. Exposes us unnecessarily. The metadata on the meeting minutes showed someone had smoothed references to battery array efficacy and third-party interference. Smoothing can be a synonym for hiding when the stakes are oxygen. Layla stared long enough that the skylight's rectangle moved across the table. She took photos. She copied file paths. She closed the folders like putting an animal back into a crate. She found Kay in the corridor and said, I need your eyes on this. Kay swore softly in a language Layla did not speak, then did a thing with her mouth that looked like an agreement to fight. Together they built a file you could carry into a room without shame. Together they decided not to go to Celine first. Arrow read the pages until stillness separated him from everyone else in the room. The chair might as well have been a throne for the kind of quiet he manufactured. He looked up. You think someone altered protocols after sign-off, he said. I think someone used your urgency, Layla answered. Used your trust. Used your absence when your body stopped cooperating and you weren't in the rooms you used to be in. He stared as if she had just edited a paragraph in the story of his life and the new version made sense. Who? He asked, and the word did not raise its voice. It did not need to. She put her finger on a paragraph. The only person with access to board minutes and engineering repositories, she said. Chief Risk Officer. He closed his eyes once like a man visiting a place he had hoped to never return to. And my aunt, he said slowly. Her note blocked the retrofit, Layla said. The smoothing is someone else's hand. He blew out a breath that shook at the end. Celine would burn the furniture to keep the foundation warm, he said. But I do not know whether she would burn me. We will find out, Layla said. Her voice had found a place to stand. They met Celine in the greenhouse because some conflicts asked to be witnessed by growing things. Arrow came in his chair deliberately because he understood the theater of refusing spectacle. Layla sat at the end of the workbench with her hands around each other like a prayer she didn't trust. Kay became furniture near the door, the kind that would hurt your shin if you ignored it. Celine arrived with the kind of face that made people tell the truth even when they meant to lie. She clocked the folder on the table, then Layla's expression, then the way Arrow's hands were not mere hands anymore but punctuation. Discovery Day, Celine said mildly. You altered minutes, Arrow said. His voice did not accuse. It informed. You vetoed a retrofit. You called it caution. It wasn't. It was a calculation, Celine replied. She set half a lemon on the bench as if the fruit had been part of this meeting. A passionate engineer wanted to open source our safety. Your idealism wanted to let her. We would have fed ourselves into litigation for a decade. I removed a dangerous path. I preserved what you built. You thought I would die, he said. I thought the world would eat you in pieces and then ask me to explain why it had been so hungry, she answered. I chose the math that saved the most. And yes, I hardened the public story to take the pressure away from the foundation. Your image became the dam that kept us from drowning. Layla felt the world tilt a few degrees and then stop. You fed him to the wolves, she said. I fed an image, Celine snapped. Not him. He is my family. I put a wall between him and the wolves who make money from the ritual of devouring men like him. You do not know what it is to keep a thing alive the world wants to eat. I know what it is to stay in the room after confession, Layla said softly. And to choose staying. Something in Celine's eyes changed shade. Not apology. Not approval. Something that recognized steel when it heard it ring. You are very good at presence, she said. You are less good at strategy. Arrow's hands stilled like animals deciding not to sprint. If he had been standing, he would have set them on the bench, palms down. The technician who died, he said. If we had retrofitted. We don't know, Celine said, and for the first time the sentence sounded like surrender. I know which risks were mine, he answered. And which were made in rooms that smelled like lemons. He surprised himself with a tired smile. You were almost right. I might have died. The thought that someone I loved chose the math where I was expendable could have finished what the illness started. Celine flinched so slightly it would take a patient eye to see. She looked at Layla, not at him. Make him angry, she said. Not sad. Anger moves. Sadness sleeps. Then she left. Her heels ticked a sentence on the stone and turned a corner. The greenhouse went quiet in that way that means something alive is listening. Layla stood and crossed to Arrow and did not say anything brave or clever. She put her palm against his cheek. Be furious later, she said. For now, be alive. He leaned into her hand like the ground had just shifted under his chair and he needed a new reference point. Stand with me, he said. She buckled the exoskeleton tight. He set his jaw and pushed against metal and grief and the intention to remain. He rose. He did not fall. The motors hummed in approval as if the machine understood the part it was playing and knew enough not to steal the scene. Quick check-in for you watching. Which matters more in love, grand gestures or quiet, consistent presence? Type grand or presence in the comments and tell me why. Your perspective might be what someone needs to hear today. After the greenhouse, they didn't chase miracles. They chased repetitions. Repetition is a miracle with a different outfit. Bad days arrived like weather that had missed a memo. On those days his hands forgot how to be his friends. On those days headlines tried to drag her into a quicksand of other people's outrage. On those days they made soup and ate it standing, because some meals want your feet to feel the floor. On those days he banned her from apologizing to furniture. Tuesdays only, he decreed, and she agreed because rules don't have to be reasonable to be useful. On Wednesdays she was allowed to apologize to the ocean if the tide had been unfair. The press office asked for photos in places that didn't smell like life. She said no unless the plan included walking to the village bakery first. People began to recognize them on the path. Nods became greetings. Greetings became names. Being known just enough can be the difference between loneliness and privacy. They kept the investigation moving under the floorboards. Kay tracked vendor invoices and timestamped drift. Imani Ndawa returned to the conversation, with eyes that did not apologize for noticing. When Layla met her, she liked the way Imani spoke in complete sentences and left room at the end for truth to interrupt. Imani opened the old proposal and flicked through the comments and shook her head. Whoever did the smoothing thought metadata was optional, Imani said. Amateurs with access. Amateurs with incentive, Kay added. Layla watched them and understood that competence is a kind of love when deployed in the direction of repair. They followed the money. They made a list of people with keys to both rooms that had been edited. The name that did not want to be found made the mistake of repeating itself. The chief risk officer had meetings that lined up too neatly with a competitor's development milestones. He had lunch-standing appointments with someone who never appeared on asset logs. He had emails that did not mention anything incorrect and yet insisted a wrong path. A good saboteur asks for nothing but the delay. A worse saboteur wants credit. He was not the good kind. They brought the file to Arrow late one afternoon while the light made the window look like a held breath. He read it once with his lawyer brain. He read it twice with whatever part of him had built an empire out of a childhood hobby and a stubborn streak. We do this the right way, he said. Full audit. Outside counsel. Invite the regulators before they knock. Celine will not love the invitation, Kay said. She does not have to love it, Arrow replied. She has to speak to it. Layla watched him and realized something else had shifted. Not just muscle returning to a negotiation with gravity. Authority had come back in a different shape. Less like thunder. More like tide. Not loud. Inarguable. Night folded down. They didn't sleep much. Not from fear. From the strange buzz of relief that arrives when the thing you suspected becomes a thing you can do something about. Before daylight, Layla walked the hallway and found the study she had slept in that first night. The rug remembered her shape. She sat with her back to the window and wrote her mother a card. 3 lines. 1 confession. 1 plan. 1 promise. Presence is the plan, she wrote. I'm not leaving the room. We're going to fix what can be fixed. She taped the cap back on her pen and let the sound be a period. The morning of the audit request arrived with a sky that couldn't decide between blue and warning. The greenhouse glass breathed in and out like a giant calm lung. Arrow's chair hummed quietly as Kay rolled him onto the terrace for air that tasted like salt and a little metal. Layla set a notebook on her lap. She did not open it. Sometimes paper is a witness. Sometimes it is a shield. Today it was a promise to remember the details. Celine stepped out, black dress, lemon in one palm as if she had plucked it from the tree and then forgotten why. She took in the sight of Kay, the notebook, the calm in Arrow's posture. She nodded once. Outside counsel, Arrow said, before she could begin. Full authority. Open the repositories. Pull access logs for the last 18 months. Inform the regulator before we submit. And I want Imani Ndawa engaged to lead the retrofit program, publicly. Celine's eyes flicked to the lemon, then back. If we invite wolves, they eat. If we don't, they circle anyway, he said. I prefer their teeth where I can see them. Celine turned to Layla as if she were the translator for a language only the two of them spoke. You have notes. I have receipts, Layla said. Metadata. Calendar overlaps. The kind that does not argue. It just exists. Celine looked at her nephew again, the set of his jaw, the absence of tremor in his voice. She placed the lemon gently on the stone railing as if it were an egg that might hatch a different day. Very well, she said. We will do it in the sunlight. And when it hurts, remember who opened the curtains. It will hurt less than dying in the dark, Arrow replied. The first week of the audit felt like pulling thread out of a sweater, except the sweater had been wrapped around an engine. Every tug revealed not just fabric but design. Outside counsel arrived with the unflappable energy of people used to walking into rooms mid-fire. The lead lawyer had a voice like clean paper and a habit of formatting everyone's panic into bullet points without raising hers. Kay moved like a metronome. She scheduled interviews, carved timelines into segments that ordinary attention could hold, and translated technical logs into human sentences. Imani set up camp in a conference room that overlooked the sea. She drew diagrams on glass and dry erase pen, arrows looping back toward decisions, boxes labeled with the kind of blunt nouns that make excuses run out of breath. She wrote, "human error," in one corner, then underlined, "incentive." Layla shadowed, not to be important, but to be present. She brought coffee. She listened without interrupting the way interpreters do when and only when interruption would alter meaning. She made lists of places where silence pressed against sentences like unseen hands. Around day 3, the logs did what logs do when someone finally looks. The edit history showed smoothing in the minutes that recorded the original retrofit debate. It didn't erase the argument. It domesticated it. Words like urgent became premature. Phrases like open source transparency became potential exposure. The voice that made the edits used the same sign-ins as the assistant to the chief risk officer. A separate log, one that only the vendor could have revealed, exposed a late-night download of battery array test outcomes from a restricted folder to a personal device registered to the chief risk officer himself. The lead lawyer placed 2 fingers on the printed page as if taking its pulse. "We will not speculate motive in the initial memo," she said. "We will present an evidence weave. The motive will emerge." "Follow the weave," Kay echoed. She drew lines on a whiteboard that connected dates to conversations to shipments to stock movement to a lunch that no one remembered until they could not forget it. Imani mapped the engineering angle. The array flaw as published in the smear was not the actual failure mode, she said, tapping the glass. The fire signature is wrong for that claim. The heat rise in the loop is half a beat late. Someone wanted people to believe the array launched broken. But the delay pattern here. She tapped again. It reads like something expected a different supervisory system and didn't find it. "You're saying they slowed the retrofit to create a failure window," the lawyer said. "I'm saying the sequence suggests a system awaiting checks that have been removed," Imani replied. "An intentional blindfold on a night you chose to drive." Layla closed her eyes for a second, not from shock, but from relief that her gut had not invented a villain for a story that did not need one. She opened them again because you cannot keep eyes closed during repair. They briefed Celine at dusk when the greenhouse had switched from lemon to wet leaf smell. She read the weave with the speed of someone who used to read reports in a war zone and could tell by the second paragraph whether the bridge had held. "Proceed," she said. "And do not flinch. We will need to inform the board before the regulator," the lead lawyer said. "We inform both," Arrow replied. "I want no sequence that looks like hiding." Celine watched him a long beat. "You are changing," she said. "I am returning," he answered. That night, Layla and Arrow could not sleep. They sat by the window with mugs cooling on the sill. The ocean threw mussel at the rocks because that is its job. He held a black cane across his knees. He had begun to carry one inside the house because the weight in his palm told his legs a story his nerves failed to tell. He lifted the cane and set it down and lifted it again, like a conductor tuning himself for a hard piece. "Do you remember the second night?" he asked. "When you made coffee like you were breaking a rule and I laughed even though laughing made my ribs sore?" "I remember your laugh as a thing that startled the room," she said. "Like birds lifting." "I didn't ask why you slept on the study rug," he said. "I thought if I named it you'd somehow feel obligated to move to that ridiculous bed." "I slept there because I wanted to be near the sea," she answered. She waited one tick of the clock. "And because the rug felt ordinary." He looked at her. Do you still feel like the bed is a promise you haven't earned? She considered. It's a promise we're earning, she said. Every day we choose repair over pretending. He nodded once. Tomorrow, when we show the board the weave, I want you in the room. Kay should be in the room, she said. Kay will be, he replied. And you? You found the first thread. Presence gets a chair. She let the word wrap around her rib cage the way a seatbelt does before the car moves. It didn't restrain her. It prepared her. Mid-episode question for you. Have you ever felt that something small you noticed became the key to fixing a much bigger problem? Drop a magnifying glass tilted left in the comments and tell me one line about it. Your story might be the nudge someone else needs to trust their instincts. The boardroom sat at the far end of a corridor that changed its mood 3 times on the walk. The carpet went from polite to expensive to serious. The meeting table looked like it had been carved from a single obedient tree. People gathered with faces that knew how to hide doubt behind words like fiduciary and continuity. Celine stood near the head but not at it. Arrow rolled in, positioned himself, set his brake. He did not stand. Not yet. The lead lawyer presented the weave. The words were not dramatic. They were factual the way gravity is factual. Sign-ins. Timestamps. The smoothing of minutes. The late-night download to a personal device. Vendor logs that aligned with schedule changes. The list of lunches that now mattered. The risk officer's signature on a memo that argued for delay while emails to a competitor's private account used phrases like timing pressure and public narrative control. The chief risk officer's face learned how to be still in a way that meant it was thinking too hard to be innocent. He cleared his throat. There are explanations, he said, and his voice tried to be calm and landed on careful. Context you are missing. Good, the lead lawyer said. You will provide them during your interview under counsel. For now, you will surrender your devices. He did not object. He did not consent. He sank into a chair that looked softer than it was and put his phone on the table like a pet he could no longer keep. Arrow's hand tightened on the cane. He looked around the room at people he had trusted to keep the ship pointed at horizon while he rebuilt the crew inside his own body. He spoke without standing. Here is the only context I will offer before the process finishes its walk. We don't fix this with a spin. We fix it with repair. A director with hair like silver clouds leaned forward. Repair is expensive, she said. Repair is cheaper than regret, Arrow replied. And less fatal. A murmur moved around the table. Not dissent. Adjustment. People who deal in money learn quickly how to calculate new realities. He continued. We will move forward on 3 rails. Legal, engineering, and public trust. Legal is in motion. Engineering belongs to Imani. Public trust begins when we apologize with a plan and dates and money attached. Apologize for what? The chief risk officer said, voice going hard, forgetting his lawyer had not told him to speak. A failed array the competitor amplified. A rumor the public chose to believe. You can't apologize for gossip. Apology is not a legal concession, the lead lawyer said evenly. It is a moral act and a strategic one when you actually repair. Imani stood from the glass where she had drawn the heat map again. She spoke like engineers do when they have decided to be understood. The retrofits begin next week. We will install open-source supervisory checks across the fleet. We will publish test harnesses so third parties can audit. We will reduce the single points of failure until a single failure requires a conspiracy to succeed. Open source invites theft, a director said. Open source invites scrutiny, Imani answered. Scrutiny is slower than theft but faster than corruption. Celine's gaze slid to Imani, then back to her nephew. Publicly, she said. Publicly, Arrow confirmed. We have spent too long hiding in private competence while the story starved in public. We will feed the public truth. Not to perform. To inoculate. The lead lawyer nodded. We'll draft a disclosure that is precise. We will omit conjecture. We will include the plan. We will give regulators the weekend before we release. Do not give them the weekend, Celine said dryly. Give them Wednesday morning. They work better when they are watched, too. People laughed. The tension bent without breaking. Layla watched from the wall, back near the door where the view is everything and the power is none. She felt something like a tide turning in a narrow channel. It doesn't roar. It reverses quietly and then cannot be stopped. After the meeting, in the corridor that smelled like new carpet pretending to be old, the chief risk officer intercepted Layla. His smile arrived without heat. You're the interpreter, he said. Interesting to see you interpret metadata. I interpret silence, she answered. Numbers are noisy. He leaned in an inch. His cologne tried to make a case. There are realities you don't understand at this level. The compromise is required. The doors that close if you open the wrong one. Layla thought of the lemon tree and the way blossoms fall without asking permission. She kept her voice even. I understand doors. I grew up in a building where the front one swelled in humidity and people had to shoulder it open together. It still worked. He looked at her, surprised, as if she had answered in a dialect he hadn't studied. Then he smiled again, a smaller animal showing teeth. Be careful whose battles you fight, he said. Be careful which side of history you think is safer, she replied. He left before she could watch his face decide what that meant. Back in the greenhouse, Arrow gripped the bar of the exoskeleton and stood. No audience. No speech. Just a man who had sat through a meeting and refused to sit through the aftermath in his own body. Layla counted inside her head out of habit. Not seconds. Breaths. 1. 2. 3. He sank into the chair with a controlled exhale and grinned. I wanted to stand in there, he said. But doing so would have made the moment about posture, not plan. You chose Tide over Thunder, she said. Thunder is theatrical, he answered. Tide is inevitable. They walked, or rolled, down to the small dock where the staff boat tied up. The afternoon had burned off the threat and left a clean horizon. He watched the chop, the lift and fall, the way a small vessel accepts correction without arguing. Confess something, he said quietly. She kept her eyes on the water. I hid cash in cookbooks when I was a student, she said. I still check the page with the banana bread recipe even though there's nothing there. He laughed softly. I used to calculate the value of every minute I slept, he said. How much money I could have made if I had stayed awake and worked. I don't know how to sleep without a project trying to use me. Tonight, she said, we will sleep because we are repairing. It counts. He nodded, and in that moment she wanted him for reasons that did not need explanations or vows or optics. She wanted him because he was learning to want ordinary, and she believed that is how empires learn to stop eating their builders. The following days folded into a rhythm only people who have chosen a difficult path understand. Meetings and logs and interviews. Quiet meals at the kitchen island because chairs at the big table made everything sound like a performance. Walks on the cliff path where the wind wrote sentences on their skin. Twice they took the ferry to the northern island to sit at a folding table with the Fishermen's Union. The wooden chairs there made everyone equal. The union president's hands were leathered maps. He looked at Arrow the way men who have lost at sea look at men who have lost on land and recognize both are losses. We don't want charity, the president said. We want fewer funerals. Then we have the same goal, Arrow replied. He signed a few words as he talked, learning to let his hands speak when his mouth needed to rest. We will fund the radio net. We will fund route training. We will fund the grant that keeps your young from thinking bravery means ignoring weather. The men nodded. A woman at the end of the table with a braid like a rope wrote notes and did not look up until she was done. Then she did, and she smiled at Layla. That was all. It felt like acceptance, the kind that does not throw a parade because the parade would scare away the point. Back at the house, Celine adjusted to transparency with the reluctant grace of a dancer changing shoes mid-song. She began to practice one new sentence before she said anything else. "What do you need?" she asked. Sometimes it sounded like a foreign phrase learned that morning. Sometimes it sounded like a woman who had decided a new strategy was not a threat to the old love. "Coffee," Arrow said once. "And for you to sit while we drink it." She blinked, then sat. The lemon tree, which had no stake in any of this, made more blossoms. The chief risk officer's lawyer tried to slow the audit with requests that sounded reasonable. The lead lawyer answered with replies that sounded like doors opening even as they blocked delay. When the devices finally coughed up the texts that would end the argument, the room went very quiet. The words were not even dramatic. They were banal. Schedule. Delay. Narrative. Window. The kind of vocabulary that weapons use when they want to look like office supplies. The regulator responded to the pre-brief with a request for a meeting that smelled like politics. Celine wore gray to that one and smiled like a person who had not forgotten how to be formidable. The lead lawyer did most of the talking. Arrow did not attempt to stand. He did not need to. Authority does not require verticality when it is telling the truth. The release day arrived. The company posted the disclosure with a plan, dates, and budgets attached. The foundation announced the coastal safety grants in the same breath. Imani did a short video in a lab coat even though she hated cameras. She said 3 sentences. "Here is what failed. Here is what we are building so it will not fail again. Here is where you can check our work." The comments under the video turned into a strange place on the internet where people thanked someone for not lying. In the middle of that strange day, Layla and Arrow ordered soup from the kitchen and ate it standing up. Kay leaned on the counter and scrolled through staff messages, raising an eyebrow now and then when someone who had once been loud went suddenly silent. "You know," Kay said, "when this is over we should all sleep for a week." "Sleep is repair," Arrow said. "Sleep is revolution," Layla added. Kay grinned. "Sleep is free therapy with better blankets." They laughed. The sound felt like a small flag planted in a field they had earned. Late that evening, the board asked for a second session. Not emergency. Clarification. People who had built their lives on numbers wanted to know if the plan could be done without wrecking the quarter. Arrow rolled in with both canes across his lap. He listened to the questions without flinching. He answered in the language of an operator who has reconciled balance sheets and real boats. When the last question hung and died, he locked the chair. He lifted one cane and set it to the floor. He lifted the other and did the same. He rose. Not to perform. To mark a change in verb tense. He did not loom. He simply occupied. "Here is what we will be," he said. "A company that apologizes with repair, not press releases. A foundation that gives away money like it knows the weight of it. A family that refuses to barter love for strategy." He did not look at Celine for the last part. He did not have to. She heard it. She took it like a woman who understood that being necessary sometimes means being wrong, and that apology has to move money to count. They adjourned. People stood and did small talk because bodies require some ritual after big talk or they break. In the corridor, the chief risk officer stood very still and allowed 2 men in dark suits to stand beside him. He did not protest. He had used his words already. Back in the greenhouse, the night air tasted like a gift someone forgot to wrap. Layla touched the lemon leaves with the back of her fingers. He reached for her hand and didn't miss. She let their fingers interlace. They stood like that without talking until Kay, who was always the quiet clock of their days, cleared her throat once. I'm going to pretend I need to inventory towels, Kay said, already halfway to the door. Inventory them very thoroughly, Layla said. Kay's laugh floated back like a blessing. He turned to Layla. Confess something, he said. She breathed once. I am afraid of being adored, she said. It feels like a trap door under the floorboards. I don't know how to stand on it. He squeezed her fingers. I am afraid of being ordinary, he said. And I have never wanted anything more. She touched his cheek. Then we are going to practice both. You will be ordinary with me. I will be adored and not fall through. They kissed with the care of people who had learned the cost of rushing and the cost of waiting too long. The chair hummed quietly. The lemon tree minded its own business. The sea kept doing its old work of arguing with rock and winning in decades. The next weeks purposely did not feel like a movie. They felt like the part of a documentary you only love after the credits when you realize nothing changed and everything did. The retrofits began. Crews and ports took ships offline in rotations that respected schedules and the fact that commerce is a tide no emperor controls. Imani's team published logs in near real time. The first external audit came back with fewer red lines than the internet hoped for and more than the company wanted. They fixed them. Celine came by on a Sunday with a pie she did not pretend to have baked. She sat at the kitchen island with a fork and ate 3 bites in silence. Then she said, I am sorry, in a voice that did not look for applause. For what? Arrow asked, not to be cruel, but because apology without an object can be ego in costume. For assuming that you were as expendable as your image, she said. I chose a story that saved the most people at the time. I did not count you among the people. I will not make that subtraction again. He nodded. Thank you, he said. The foundation will outlive both of us. I hope it does, she said. But not because we died of stubbornness. They sat together for a while, the 3 of them, like a family that had gotten lost in a storm and found the same lamppost to stand under until the rain calmed down enough to see. On a Thursday that looked like any other, his hands forgot him again. The spoons felt like riddles. The door control that usually obeyed him ignored. The rage came up like a tide that wanted to break a seawall. He closed his eyes. He counted. He failed to calm. He opened his eyes and looked at her. I hate this, he said. I hate it with you, she answered. We will hate it and then do the thing. He nodded. She came around the chair and stood behind him and slid her arms under his in a practiced way. He let her be his hinge. Together they turned. The door obeyed the second time. The rage didn't vanish. It diluted. That night they started a new ritual. They sat on the edge of the bed with their feet on the rug and took inventory of the day. Where they showed up. Where they flinched. Where they forgave. Where they needed to try again. It sounded clinical when they described it to Kay later. It felt like sweeping a room so you could find the floor in the morning. On Friday, the village bakery wrapped their bread in brown paper and wrote, "Welcome back," on the bag. The woman with the rope braid from the union handed Layla a small keychain carved like a boat. For your keys, she said. So they don't feel lonely. Layla thanked her and thought about how small objects can carry permission. They began to sleep with the windows open whenever the night allowed it. Sea air wrecked the crispness of expensive linens and replaced it with something that felt like living. On one of those nights, thunder tested the horizon with soft practice rumbles. He woke and sat up and said, "Confess, the way you ask for water." She said, "I cheated on a spelling test in 6th grade by writing harbor on my wrist," and they both laughed in the dark like children hiding under a table. The next morning she wrote harbor on an index card and taped it to a cabinet in the kitchen. Her mother came to visit on Sunday and left a smudge of a fingerprint beside the word as if blessing the joke. There were setbacks sharp enough to cut a week in half. A headline that got the verbs wrong. A donor dinner that smelled like performative virtue instead of bread. A phone call from a cousin who wanted to reconcile and meant borrow. They did not pretend these didn't matter. They counted them with the same inventory they used for joy. They decided to be brave about ordinary things. When the regulator's report returned, it was not a vindication. It was a plan with teeth. It named failures in process. It suggested criminal referral for the chief risk officer. It praised the new engineering program. It recommended external monitors and a schedule that would hurt and help at the same time. They accepted the whole document without quibbling clauses. The lead lawyer sent a message that read only, "Good." Kay wrote back, "Let's eat." They held a small vow renewal in the greenhouse on a spring morning that smelled like soil. It wasn't for the internet. It wasn't for the board. It was so two people could say words they would mean, not just survive through. Kay stood near the door with eyes that didn't mind crying. Imani tied a sprig of rosemary around Layla's wrist and said, "For remembrance and stubbornness." Layla's mother read the closing blessing with a voice that had been to a cliff and back and decided to bring a souvenir. Celine brought the lemon tree a new pot. After the vows, they walked the cliff path. He took the canes for the first 100 steps. He paused. He put them down. He took 6 steps without them. He fell into the grass laughing, not the laughter of a man denying pain, but the laughter of a man meeting joy in a place he wasn't sure he'd ever see again. She fell beside him. Sky above. Grass in hair. Breath loud. The ocean pretending not to watch. Quick nudge if you're still with me. Share this with one person who needs the reminder that real apology is repair with dates attached. And subscribe if you want more true-to-life love stories that teach as they move. Evenings settled into something like peace. Not the peace of nothing happening. The peace of the right things happening slowly enough to stick. They kept the Tuesday rule of no apologizing to furniture. They added Wednesday confessions about ridiculous fears, like escalators, and the silent judgment of smart fridges. They cooked once a week even though the kitchen could conjure food without them. Burning onions together became the smell of trying. On a day without a name, they visited the ferry landing at low tide and watched children leap from the last step into mud like astronauts in reverse. He said, "I used to believe adventure required altitude." She said, "I used to believe safety required invisibility." They both stood a little taller afterward. Back at the house, the lemon tree decided to make fruit in a season it technically shouldn't. Celine took that as a sign and announced it in the family chat like a proud aunt. Kay responded with a lemon emoji. Imani wrote, "Photos or it didn't fruit," and Celine sent a photo that was not quite in focus. People who do strategy do not always do cameras. The day the chief risk officer's arraignment hit the news, the internet tried to make it an opera. They did not sing along. They made soup. He stood for 12 breaths. She wrote her mother a card with a drawing of a lemon and a stick figure with 2 canes and a caption, "We are doing it." Night crept up the windows like it always does. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at her with the kind of attention that recognizes a person and not a role. "What are we building?" he asked. She thought for a second, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to say it right. "An ordinary worth protecting," she said. He smiled. "An ordinary worth bragging about," he said. "An ordinary that can survive storms," she added. They fell asleep with the wind trying on different keys like a choir warming up. The weeks after the arraignment felt like a coastline smoothing under patient waves. The headlines learned new verbs. The company repaired. The foundation gave. The board discovered that transparency was not a fire but a window. Layla and Arrow learned to live between appointments the way people learn to breathe between waves. One morning, a fog rolled in so thick the greenhouse looked like a ship cut loose from its moorings. The lemon tree appeared and disappeared in pale curtains. Kay wheeled Arrow in and set the brake. He touched the cane once and left it on his lap. "Tell me what the fog is doing," he said. Making the world pretend it has secrets, Layla answered. And giving us permission to move slowly. Permission noted, he said. We will move slowly today. They did. He stood for 9 breaths, not 12. She read a chapter and a half instead of 2. They let the house be a ship and the fog be a harbor and the day be a small thing they were allowed to keep. At noon, Imani sent a photo of a crew finishing a retrofit in weather that did not want to cooperate. She wrote, "We did not negotiate with the rain. We worked under it." Celine replied with a single check mark. Kay added, "Cover your hair." Someone on the engineering team responded with a photo of a bright yellow cap that looked like joy pretending to be a safety measure. That afternoon, a package arrived for Layla addressed in her mother's latest handwriting, the letters wide and confident enough to make her eyes sting. Inside was a stack of index cards tied with a ribbon and a note. "You taught me to name the days," the note read. "Here are some names back." Each card held a word and a memory in simple sentences. Bread. The smell when it lifts. Street. Morning vendors. Harbor. A girl with a word on her wrist. Layla read the cards aloud while Arrow closed his eyes and let the sentences set like plaster. When she finished, he opened his eyes and smiled in a way that carried weight and light in equal measure. "Your mother is writing us a house," he said. "She is," Layla replied. "And we live in it without rent." That evening, the village school invited the foundation to a safety fair. The head teacher wanted someone to talk about weather radios and the difference between bravery and recklessness. Layla expected Celine to send a spokesperson with a crisp script. Celine surprised everyone and went herself. She stood in a gym that smelled like rubber floor and old sunshine and held up a hand radio. "This is a tool," she said. "Tools are not magic. They do not care if you are strong or scared. They require you to listen." She looked at the rows of children in plastic chairs and added, less formal, "Listening will save your life." The children stared with the frank intensity of people who have not learned yet to pretend. A boy in the front, narrow-shouldered and bright-eyed, raised his hand. "What if you're listening and the adults are not?" he asked. "Then you say it twice," Celine said. "And you keep saying it until someone hears. And if they do not, you find a different adult." She paused. "And you do not go on the boat?" The boy nodded. He made a private note. Layla made a public one. Courage sometimes begins with permission. After the fair, Celine walked back to the car with Layla and Arrow. She carried the radio like a fruit. "I should have done this years ago," she said, "not to get credit, but to pay a debt." "You're doing it now," Layla answered. "That counts." "It is all that counts," Celine said, and she looked at the sky like a woman measuring weather with her eyes. The next morning did not cooperate. Arrow's hands decided spoons were riddles again. Layla watched frustration crawl up his throat like ivy looking for a wall. She put her palm on the back of his shoulder and left it there until his breath corrected itself. "I hate asking," he said. "I hate that you have to," she answered. "Ask anyway." He did. She did. They moved through the kitchen like two people who had practiced a dance awkward enough to be theirs. Later, he rolled to the window and stared at a sea that pretended it had never heard of spoons. He tapped the cane against his leg in a rhythm that could have been a prayer or a threat to gravity. "Confess something," he said without turning. She leaned against the sill. "I sometimes compose emails in my head to people I will never send them to," she said. "I line up the arguments like dishes on a drain board. I dry them. I put them away. Then I eat a quiet dinner and do not send the email." He smiled at the glass. "I sometimes imagine explaining this," he said, tapping the cane gently. "To a version of me that would have sneered. I practice the sentences until he softens." "What does he say?" she asked. "He says, 'You were right about presents,'" Arrow replied. "And he hands me a spoon." They went to the Union again the following week. The ferry schedule had shifted for repairs, and they stood on the dock with a small cluster of commuters in raincoats. A woman with a bright scarf and a bag of groceries looked at Arrow's chair and then at his face and said, "You look like someone who used to run everywhere. Now you make the ground come to you. That's a trick." He laughed. "It is a trick," he said. "It took me too long to learn it." On the ferry, Layla stood close enough that her hip brushed the armrest. He looked up at her and then out at the water and then back at her and said, "When this is all less noisy, what do you want to do on a Sunday?" She pictured it without trying. "Make pancakes badly," she said. "Read on the couch. Ignore my phone. Sit on the steps outside and watch gulls argue about nothing." He nodded. "I want to be annoyed by a crossword and lose to it," he said. "I want to be bored in a way that feels earned." They smiled at each other like co-conspirators plotting a heist on urgency. The Union Hall smelled like coffee that had been made early and forgiven. The president shook Arrow's hand and held it a beat longer than expected, not because he did not know what to do with the chair, but because he wanted to do this part right. "The radios work," he said. "We had a boat turn back last night because the weather said, no, and the captain listened." "That sentence might be my favorite thing I have heard this year," Arrow replied. A younger man at the end of the table frowned at a spreadsheet and then looked up. "When does the outside stop demanding we perform?" he asked. "Every week the paper wants a quote. Every week the doc wants a camera. I just want to fish and come home." "When the story finishes its first season," the president said. "When they get bored. We will still be here." "We will still be here," Arrow echoed. "That is the plan." On the way back, the ferry rocked harder. Layla looked at the white foam along the hull and thought about the word ordinary. It had become a banner they walked under every day, not because their lives lacked drama, but because they refused to name the drama greater than the work. A text from the lead lawyer buzzed on Kay's phone. She read it, then raised an eyebrow. "The competitor is making noises about suing for defamation," she said. "Because we said sabotage out loud." "We said it in a courtroom," the lead lawyer replied from somewhere inside Kay's message thread. "They can make all the noises they want." Celine texted a lemon emoji, which meant, at this point in their family language, let them pucker. They reached the dock and found the same woman with the bright scarf, now with a new bag of bread and the same look of permission on her face. She waved. "Pancakes on Sunday," she called to Layla, as if she had been present on the conversation and endorsed it. "Pancakes on Sunday," Layla called back, and realized the town had decided to hold them to their plans, which is another form of love. That night, the wind changed. It blew hard enough to rearrange furniture in the sky. Arrow could not settle. His legs buzzed in the wrong key. He pushed the blanket off and pulled it back and pushed it off again. Layla lay on her side and watched him fight a war with the air. "Stand with me," he said finally. They went to the hallway and the bar mounted there for practice. He braced. She buckled. Kay, who had a sixth sense for when a moment required witness and not help, appeared and leaned on the opposite wall as if she had always been part of the house. "Count," he said. Layla counted. He stood. It wasn't beautiful. It was an argument with gravity that ended in a draw. He sat. He stood again. He sat. Kay said nothing, which in Kay's language meant everything. On the third stand, he did not ask her to count. He counted himself. When he sat down, sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. He looked at Layla and then at Kay and then at the floor that had accepted and returned him 3 times. "I am keeping these seconds," he said. "They belong to me." The following afternoon, a letter arrived from a family of the technician who had died. It was not angry. It was not forgiving. It was true. "We see what you are doing," it said. "We see that it will not bring him back. We see that it will keep someone else. We see you. Arrow read the letter twice. He set it on the table. He put both hands flat on either side of it and bowed his head as if receiving a blessing that hurt and healed at the same time. Layla placed her hand between his and the paper. "Presents," she said. "Presents," he echoed. They brought the letter to the Union Hall the next week and read it aloud. The room listened in a silence that respected the dead and the living. When they finished, the president took the letter as if accepting a flag at a ceremony and put it in a folder that contained other papers that mattered. "Confession," he said, looking at Arrow. "I wanted to hate you cleanly. Then you showed up messy and human. I do not know what to do with that except shake your hand and tell you to keep showing up." "I will keep showing up," Arrow said. On a Tuesday, the press called Layla a saint again. She burned nothing this time. She laughed and opened the windows wider. She texted her mother a photo of the sea and a caption that read, "We are open to weather." Her mother sent back a photo of bread and a caption that read, "We are open to rising." Mid-episode check for you. In your own life, which tiny ritual keeps you brave? A walk around the block. A single honest sentence. Share it in the comments in one line. Someone reading might need your ritual to try tonight. A month later, the retrofits hit a predictable snag. A port delayed a permit. A vendor tried to upcharge. A sensor refused to cooperate in damp air. Imani sent a message that listed the problems like a shopping list. Then she added, "We will solve them in the following order." The list beneath read like a woman who had no interest in panic. They solved them in that order. The censor stopped sulking. The vendor apologized with a discount. The port found a stamp they had misplaced. Layla and Kay took a long lunch at the village cafe where the soup tasted like an apology someone meant. Kay stirred her bowl and said, "Do you ever think about how your life would have gone if you had said no in that room with the ocean window?" "Yes," Layla said. "I would have managed. I would have translated words for other people and taken the long way home on Fridays and fallen asleep to serials on the radio and put my mother's cards in a box. I would have lived. But I would have been haunted by a window." Kay nodded. "I would have kept rowing," she said. "Metaphorically. I will probably keep rowing until I die. But it is nice to row towards something I can point to." They paid. They walked back in a wind that felt like a friend pulling them faster. When they reached the house, Celine was in the greenhouse with a notebook open to a page that looked like someone had finally let her draw a map she carried in her head for 20 years. She tapped a line with the end of her pen. "We have been giving large grants to large institutions and small grants to small ones," she said. "We missed the middle. The organization's too grown to be scrappy and too small to be complacent. We will design a middle grant. Call it a bridge grant. It will come with mentoring. I will do the mentoring." "That's work," Layla said. "It is also penance," Celine replied. "And I do not intend to outsource it." She closed the notebook and looked up. "How is he today?" she asked, meaning Arrow. "He's practicing standing angry," Layla said. "It moves faster than standing sad." "Good," Celine said. "Anger is gas. Sadness is ballast. We need both, but I only pour one into a tank." That night, storms rehearsed near the horizon and then decided to save their performance. The air smelled like water thinking. Layla and Arrow sat on the steps outside the study because sitting on steps is an underrated luxury in big houses. "I am going to ask you a question I do not want you to answer quickly," he said. "Ask it," she replied. "Do you want children?" he asked. She looked at the grass, at the lemon leaves, at his hands resting on his knees like two calm animals. She did not rush. "I want to choose us first," she said. "I want to see how our ordinary holds under years and not just months. If we choose children, I want to choose them with the same vow we used for this. Presence over performance. Repair over panic." He breathed in, breathed out. I want to trust my body more before I ask more of it, he said. I want to be a father who can sit on the floor and not hate the floor. Then we will let the question be a question, she said. And if it becomes an answer, we will recognize it. They sat in the dark and let the question be a companion instead of an ultimatum. The next day, Arrow woke with a steadiness that felt like an unearned gift. He used it well. He stood 3 times without counting. He signed through an entire conversation with a staffer who had grown up with a deaf brother and went home glowing. He wrote an email to the board that used the word enough in a sentence about bonuses and chose a number that surprised everyone and embarrassed no one. In the afternoon, the lead lawyer called with the tone of someone carrying a heavy box carefully. The investigation is complete, she said. The referral is filed. The case is strong. There will be noise. There will also be relief. Thank you, Arrow said. Take a day off. She laughed for the first time in weeks. I will take a half, she said. A day would frighten me. He hung up and looked at Layla. We are exiting one season, he said. I do not know the name of the next one. Call it practice, she said. He nodded. Practice, he repeated, and the word sounded like a road you could walk every day and still find new stones. They made pancakes on Sunday. They were terrible. They looked like maps of countries that don't exist. They tasted like victory disguised as breakfast. They ate them anyway and licked syrup off thumbs like children. The village woman with the bright scarf walked by and saw them through the window and gave them a thumbs up they did not deserve and cherished anyway. That evening, Layla's mother came over with a scarf for the lemon pot and a story about a neighbor who had learned to bake out of spite. They drank tea. They played a simple card game that required remembering face values and forgiving mistakes. Her mother won twice and did not pretend it had been close. On her way out, her mother looked at Arrow and said, "Stand," and he did, because sometimes the right voice uses one word like a bell. He stood for 11 breaths. He sat down and grinned at her like a boy who had just been caught doing something right. She kissed his hair and told him not to let the wind steal him. After she left, he leaned back and closed his eyes. I will never tire of being told what to do by your mother, he said. Neither will I, Layla answered. The internet moved on because the internet always does. The story cooled into a line people used at dinner tables to prove they kept up. The foundation's posts got fewer exclamation points. The company's posts got more charts. Arrow walked 3 steps witut canes in a hallway that smelled like varnish and lemon. He didn't announce it. Kay saw. She clapped her mouth shut with both hands and then reached for the nearest towel to pretend to inventory. Later, she walked into the kitchen and said, "Ate a towel by accident," and they all laughed so hard the lemon tree shook. On a Tuesday, Layla woke anxious without reason. Anxiety does that. It arrives with no luggage and begs to be housed. She went outside and stood by the cliff and watched the sea do its ancient work. The wind took small liberties with her hair. She put her hand on the low wall and let the stone assure her it had been here longer than fear. When she came back inside, he was waiting in the hall with both canes and the look of a man rehearsing something he wanted to get right. I need to say this plain, he said. I want you to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. There is no other shoe. There are storms. There are seasons. There are stupid headlines. There are forks we will choose wrong sometimes. But the floor is ours. We built it. The shoes can do what they want. She exhaled in a way that felt like giving a key back to the landlord of a house she had already left. I will try to believe you, she said. You do not have to try, he replied. You can act as if you believe me. Belief follows practice. Practice again, she said. Practice again, he echoed. They took the ferry north once more for a meeting that had nothing to do with grants or radios. It was a memorial unveiling on a small point of land where the sea visited too aggressively in winter and then apologized with flowers in spring. The technician's family had asked them to come. They stood near the back, where grief belongs when it did not know the dead personally and loves them anyway. A sculpture shaped like a hand held a small bowl. The bowl caught rain. It held it a while. It gave it back to the ground. After the short words and the long silence, the technician's sister walked to them. She looked like someone who could carry a boat on her back and would have asked. She put her hand on Arrow's shoulder. "You showed up," she said. "Keep showing up. For someone else." "I will," he said. "I promise." On the way back, Layla rested her head on his shoulder. He leaned his head against hers. The ferry engine made a soothing argument with distance. They watched a gull defy physics and decide to land anyway. "You know what I want," she said, half to herself. "I want a day where the biggest thing we do is pick a movie and then argue about snacks." He chuckled. "Pretzels will win," he said. "Popcorn will win," she countered. "We shall practice compromise," he said. They did. The next Friday night became a movie ritual. They chose terrible films on purpose so the conversation afterward would be better than the story. They invented a rating scale that made sense only to them. Lemon blossoms earned a point. Boats earned 2. Unnecessary explosions lost 3. A line spoken plainly that landed like a life plan earned 5. Weeks folded, unfolded, refold. The regulator sent another letter that used the word satisfactory in a way that made everyone in their orbit want to cry from relief. The competitor went quiet in public and loud in court. The lawyers responded with the patience of carpenters measuring twice and cutting once. The world settled into a rhythm that felt like wind at their back instead of in their face. One evening, months after the arraignment, Layla stood at the window with her mother. They traced letters on the glass like children pretending to be poets. Her mother wrote SEA again and then tapped the last letter twice and smiled with all her teeth. The house made a sound like old wood that has decided to trust new nails. Arrow rolled in and stopped beside them. He rested a hand on the sill, then on her shoulder, then on the place between them where the air keeps secrets. He turned the chair off. The silence that followed was gentle and loud in equal parts. "Stand," her mother said. He did. He did not count. He did not tremble first. He stood and then he took one step, and then another, and then a third. He reached the edge of the rug and stopped because sometimes you stop at the edge of a rug. He laughed. They did too. "Confess," he said softly, out of habit, out of love. Layla pressed her cheek into his shoulder. "I am starting to trust easy things," she said. "Like soup on Tuesdays. And your voice on the phone when you say, 'I'll be there soon.' And lemon blossoms deciding to fall when nobody's watching." He kissed the top of her head. "I am starting to trust slow things," he said. "Like sleep. And tides. And the way a hand learns again what it knew and forgot." They stood in a study that wasn't a study so much as a room that had watched them grow. Outside, the water kept practicing its argument with rock. Inside, the people kept practicing their argument with fear. Both were old arguments. Both were worth having. Later that night, before sleep, Layla said, "I want to tell the truth on camera." He turned toward her in the dark. "What truth?" "That I did not marry you for love," she said. "And that I stayed because presence turned into love. I want to say it where people can hear me and not make it a slogan." He was quiet long enough for her to think he had fallen asleep. Then he said, "Do it." "You're not worried about how it will play?" she asked. "It will play like weather," he said. "Some will bring umbrellas. Some will dance. Then I will say it," she said. "You will say it," he echoed. They slept with the window open. The wind did not frighten them. It found their hair and invented small arrangements and left. The next morning, she filmed it in the greenhouse because truth likes plants. No makeup. No script. Kay held the phone. Celine stood just out of frame with the lemon tree, pretending to inspect leaves. Layla looked into the lens like a person who had decided to stop borrowing language. I did not marry him for love, she said. I married him to keep something alive that had kept my mother alive. I stayed, and showing up turned into love. If you are doing a good thing for a complicated reason, do not wait to be perfect before you stay. Just stay. Then repair. Then tell the truth about both. She sent the video to the channel and then put the phone down and made tea. The comments came as they always do, like rain with opinions. Some people called her brave. Some people called her names. Some people said, me too. She read 3. She closed the app. She poured the tea. She handed a cup to Celine, who blew on it once and said, you did not mention lemons. I am offended. Layla laughed. Next time, she said. Kay posted the video privately to the staff channel and added, Tuesday rule applies, no apologizing to furniture. The engineering team replied with lemon emojis and a photo of a ship leaving port with a banner that read repair is a verb. That afternoon, the village woman with the bright scarf appeared at the gate with a small paper bag. Cookies, she said. Sweet on purpose. For the bitter comments. Thank you, Layla said. I will eat them slowly and not read slowly. Eat quickly, the woman advised. Read later. They ate 2 on the steps. They tasted like cinnamon and stubbornness. As the sun went down, Arrow set both canes by the door and looked at them like old friends who had shown up every day and asked for nothing except being used. He picked one up and put it in the closet. He left the other by the door. Not retired, he said. Semi. Layla nodded. Like a professor who still shows up on Tuesdays, she said. They went inside. The house made space for them. The night poured into the windows like a long drink. Before they slept, he turned to her and said, we are close to an ending. We are close to a beginning, she countered gently. Both, he agreed. Tomorrow, I want to go to the cliff and stand without anything. Then we will, she said. He smiled in the dark where she could feel it and not see it. Presence, he whispered. Always, she answered. The morning he chose for the cliff was clean and winded like a runner after a good race. The sky had been polished in the night. The sea rehearsed its lines without shouting. Layla woke before the alarm and lay still, listening for the small sounds his body made when it negotiated with itself. The absence of struggle felt like permission. Kay met them by the door with a thermos and a grin she did not bother to hide. Inventorying towels off-site, she said, which in their house meant, I will be nearby but invisible. Celine texted a lemon emoji and the words, do not fall off what we have built. Imani sent a photo of a ship mid-harbor turn with the caption, you have the wheel. They moved down the stone path together. He used one cane for the traverse across the patio and then set it against the low wall that kept people honest in wind. The chair waited 6 steps back like a loyal dog told to stay. The air smelled like salt, and like the kind of quiet that holds its breath for applause it has no intention of asking for. Count me, he said. I can, she answered. Or I can be the place your eyes land when numbers feel like too much. Be the place, he said. He put his hands on the wall, palms flat, like blessing a threshold. He shifted forward onto the balls of his feet, then stood taller as if his spine had remembered an old instruction. He let his hands leave the wall. The morning tilted without moving. He stood. One breath. Another. Another. He did not ask for the cane. He did not ask for the chair. Layla did not count, but something inside her measured anyway. She had learned that bodies prefer sentences to numbers when the work is this personal. She thought, you are here. You are allowed. You belong to breath. He stood a few heartbeats longer and then laughed, the sound of a person meeting a version of himself he had been writing toward for months. "I am doing it," he said. "You are," she answered. "You are." He did not push for a step. He did not try to impress the future. He let the present be worth enough to carry home. They returned slowly. He paused by the lemon tree and touched a leaf with the back of his hand. He paused by the study and looked at the rug and smiled like you smile at an old friend in whose house you once took shelter. He paused in the hallway and leaned against the practice bar and did not practice. He simply leaned. In the kitchen, he poured tea with both hands. It was not elegant. It was accurate. Layla watched the liquid find the cup and felt a relief so ordinary it nearly undid her. "Confess," he said, "because rituals keep people from floating." She looked at the steam. "I am a little terrified of how happy this feels," she said. "Like I've stepped into a room and expected a trapdoor and found flooring instead." He nodded. "I am a little terrified of how quiet my mind is," he said. "It used to roar. Now it purrs. I do not know who I am without the emergency. I am learning." They carried the tea to the greenhouse. Kay pretended to sort shears by color. Celine appeared with a notebook and did not write in it. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a map that has finally been corrected for an error she refused to admit had always bothered her. "Well," she said. "Well," he answered. "Do it again tomorrow," she said. "I will," he replied. Imani arrived mid-morning with harbor dust on her shoes and a grin that also refused elegance. She hugged Layla, hugged Kay, hugged Celine, then stopped in front of Arrow as if considering whether to hug the ocean. He stuck out his hand and she took it and shook with a sincerity that made both of them laugh. "Fleet status," she said. 76% complete. A retrofit team lost a lunch to a seagull, which counts as a sacrifice. The external auditors found a rogue comma in paragraph 7 and are ecstatic. The union sent baklava. "We will never be lean again." "Baklava is compliance," Celine said. "Do not argue." They ate sugar and nuts in a corner that smelled like soil coming up for air. The greenhouse felt less like a stage and more like a room where life does not have to be presented to be true. The day turned toward afternoon. The lead lawyer arrived with a folder and a face that looked rested for the first time in months. She set the folder down but did not open it. "It's over," she said. "The plea is in." The court accepted the facts. He confessed to interference and conspiracy. The competitor offered a settlement to the regulator so quickly we nearly missed the email. They will be paying for safety grants in every port for 10 years. The regulator has closed the active part of the file. We move to monitoring and report cards. And, for whatever it's worth, they used the sentence from your speech, "apologize with repair," as a model in their own consent decree. Celine laughed once, a bright, unguarded sound. "Imagine," she said. "Strategy with a soul." The lawyer smiled and finally opened the folder. "One more thing," she said. "The family issued a statement we didn't ask for. We accept the apology attached to action. We will accept it every year it arrives with proof. They are braver than all of us." Arrow closed his eyes a moment and opened them again. "We will send the proof." "You will," the lawyer agreed. "And I am taking the rest of the day." Which, for the record, feels like jumping off a dock and hoping the water knows my name. "Go jump," Kay said. "We will write a memo if you don't resurface." They laughed. They let relief be silly. It is a skill. Late afternoon, Layla and Arrow walked the corridor that used to intimidate him. The varnish smell had faded into a less aggressive woodiness. He used one cane, then none for 3 steps, then one again. The house did not seem to notice. That felt right. He stopped by the window that started their beginning, the one that cut the sea into a rectangle and made people forget to turn around. "I owe this window a thank you," he said. It owes you one back, she replied. They stood quietly until the sun found a seam in the clouds and laid a thin path of gold across the water. He reached for her hand and did not miss. She did not grip in panic. They simply held. Evening layered itself over the island. The village bells practiced a tune. Someone down the lane burned something that smelled like bread crust and thyme. They sat on the steps again as the house cooled. I want to ask you a different question, he said. Ask, she answered. What do you want our legacy to be, he asked. Not the company. Not the foundation. Us. Two people who did not meet perfect and did not end perfect. She thought of the greenhouse vows and the lemon blossoms and her mother's cards. She thought of Kay's pretend towel inventory and Imani's matter-of-fact heroism. She thought of Celine learning to ask a question before giving an order. She thought of the fairy woman's scarf and the boy at the safety fair and the technician's sister who could carry a boat. Presents you can stand on, she said. Not a statue. A path. Something other people can walk without feeling they are trespassing. He nodded. Presents you can stand on, he said. That is the product. They went to bed early. Sleep arrived courteously. Morning returned with the kind of blue you cannot bottle. He practiced again. He stood without the wall for 6 breaths. He took a step. He rested. He took another. He rested. He did not fall. He kept the chair near not out of fear but out of friendship. A package showed up mid-morning with no return address and the exact energy of a gift from someone who does not want to be thanked. Inside was a small wooden plaque carved with the words, "Repair is a verb." Kay nailed it to the inside of a cupboard door so they would see it every morning when finding mugs. Confess, he said at lunch. She smiled. I googled how to be adored without turning it into a job, she said. The answers were terrible. He laughed gently. I practiced asking you for help in the mirror, he said. The mirror laughed. They kept the Tuesday rule. They added a Thursday ritual. On Thursdays they picked one fear and spoke it in one sentence. They did not fix it. They named it and put it on a shelf. Those shelves became crowded and then less frightening because everything is less frightening on a shelf. On a fairy Friday, the union president handed Arrow a hat that said Captain in a font that took itself too seriously. You cannot wear this in public, the president said. But you can wear it in your kitchen. I will, Arrow promised. He did, that night, while washing dishes slowly and with purpose, which is how you wash dishes when your hands have been gone and come back. Summer leaned in. The foundation launched the bridge grants Celine invented. She sat at a wobbly table with applicants and asked, "What do you need?" and wrote their answers in pen. She made connections and calls and a noise to her own staff that sounded like a warning not to waste anyone's time. She came to dinner once a week and rarely gave advice. When she did, it was pre-approved by silence. Imani finished the last retrofit with a team that had learned each other's habits the way musicians do. They ate baklava on a loading dock and took a photo they did not publish, which made it more real. The regulator visited and left with a smile and a checklist that had fewer boxes than it used to. Headlines turned to other fires. The company felt less like a person under review and more like a machine that had chosen to be ethical. The foundation felt less like a shield and more like a hand. Layla filmed another short video. She kept it simple. When you cannot apologize with a sentence, she said, apologize with a calendar and a budget. She set the phone down and made soup. People shared the clip more than they argued with it. Sometimes the internet is tired of fighting too. In late summer, her mother hosted them for dinner and served bread that did not need butter but accepted it anyway. After they ate, her mother pulled out a stack of index cards and said, "New assignment," with the command voice of a teacher who had decided learning would be fun. Each card had a word. Harbor. Patience. Table. Floor. They took turns defining the words without using the word. Harbor, Layla said. A place that lets you be small without being in danger. Patience, Arrow said. A bridge you walk on while someone else rebuilds the road. Table, her mother said. An altar with crumbs. Floor, Kay said from the kitchen doorway, holding a towel. Proof. They laughed. They wrote the sentences down. They put the cards in a new ribbon. They made a home out of definitions. Autumn began her apprenticeship. The wind sharpened. The sea got frank. The lemon tree decided to keep trying anyway. On a day with low cloud and high purpose, Layla and Arrow returned to the cliff. He left the cane inside. He took her hand. He stood. He walked 3 steps with her fingers as counterweight and then stopped and turned, not because he had to but because he wanted to see where he had started. I did not believe this, he said. Neither did I, she answered. But we believed the steps, he said. We did, she agreed. We did. They walked back. They did not perform for anyone but the stone and the sea. That felt like enough. Near the end of the year, the village school asked Layla to speak to a class about languages of all kinds. She brought 2 sets of index cards. One said words like courage and apology and presence. The other was blank. She asked the children to write their own meanings. A girl with careful handwriting wrote, apology. The thing you say when you are ready to fix it. A boy who drew trucks on his math sheets wrote, presence. A person shaped like a lighthouse. When the bell rang, the teacher whispered, thank you. Layla walked back to the path and felt 10 feet tall and exactly her height at the same time. On the way home, the woman with the bright scarf waved them into the bakery. Taste this, she said, handing them slices of something sweet that pretended to be bread and got away with it. It is called triumph. They ate. It was. In the evening, Arrow stood in the doorway of the study and looked at the rug where Layla had slept that first night. He turned to her. I would like to ask you to do the most ordinary thing we can think of, he said. Name it. She did not overthink. Hang laundry, she said. On a line. Outside. With ridiculous clothespins. He blinked, then smiled. We will hang laundry, he said, as if scheduling a board vote. They did. The next day. Sheets lifted like flags and surrendered like dancers. The wind tried to make mischief and did. They pinned and repinned and laughed. Celine took a photo from the terrace and did not post it anywhere. She printed it and put it in a frame in the kitchen that had been waiting for something that deserved it. Night fell early. They made soup. They ate standing. They did their inventory. Where they showed up. Where they flinched. Where they forgave. Where they needed to try again. It never got old. It never got easy. It got normal. Winter arrived with a storm that did not ask permission. Thunder rolled its shoulders. Lightning practiced lines on the horizon. The house made that animal sound homes make when they remember they are meant to protect. Layla and Arrow stood at the study window with mugs that warmed their palms. Confess, he said. She did not hesitate. I do not want a single version of my life where we did not learn how to stand, she said. He nodded and touched his cup to hers like a toast that knew it had been to a funeral. Presence, he said. Always, she answered. They went to the cliff the morning after the storm to see what had changed. The sea had moved small stones around as if resetting a game. The air tasted like iron and lemons and breath. He put his hands on the wall. He looked at her. He stood. He turned to face her and took a step forward and then another. He reached her and pressed his forehead to hers as if the world could balance there. I thought pity brought you to me, he said. But presence did. And presence is just love wearing work clothes. She smiled with her whole face. I did not marry you for love, she said. I stayed. Staying taught me love. Staying taught me everything. They stood like that until the cold asked them to go in. They went. The house opened its arms and the lemon tree released a single blossom out of season. Weeks later, they hosted a small dinner that felt like a summit disguised as a meal. The union president brought jokes that landed softly. Imani brought a pie she had baked, which confused everyone until she cut it and revealed competence is contagious. Celine brought a new grant spreadsheet and did not open it. Kay brought nothing and everything and leaned in the doorway with a satisfaction that made the room warmer. At dessert, Layla lifted a glass. To repair, she said. To presents. To the ordinary we chose. To lemons, Celine added. To towels, Kay said. To tides, Imani said. To boats that come back, the president said. To lighthouses shaped like people, Arrow finished. They drank. They did not overdo the sentiment. They washed dishes slowly and with care. After midnight, when the house had exhaled its guests into the dark, Layla and Arrow stood in the hallway with the practice bar and did not practice. They looked at it like a relic and a friend. We begin again tomorrow, she said. We do, he agreed. We always do. On a snow-bright morning, she posted one last video. It was simple. No music. No cuts. Just her voice in a room that had seen them all the way through. If you stayed to the end, she said, thank you. If this story found you while you were in your own storm, remember this. Pity soothes guilt. Presence builds trust. Apology without repair is a press release. Strategy without love will spend you like a resource. Ordinary rituals are radical. Pick one. Do it tonight. And if this helped, share it with one person who needs proof that staying can turn into love. She set the phone down. She turned to him. He stood. He took a step. He laughed softly. The sea answered with its old, patient argument. The lemon tree ignored the calendar. The house did its job. Their love never learned how to be a fairy tale. It learned how to stand. Final prompt for you. What's one small ordinary ritual you will practice this week to make repair a verb in your life? Type it in one line in the comments. And if this story gave you something to hold on to, share it with a friend and subscribe so more people can turn presence into love.